Do more is a call to action for all Australians to be allies, making the commitment to become more informed, more educated, and more engaged in creating positive change to challenge racism. This conversation series seeks to make change through storytelling. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, and what we learn through storytelling culture of the longest continuous civilization on the planet. We pay our respect to elders, past and present.
I'm Shelley Ware and I'm talking to West Coast AFL Superstar Nic Natanui for the Do More campaign, and I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and their family. Welcome, Nic. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you here with the Do More campaign. Tell me, what was it like growing up as a young Fijian man, and what does culture mean to you?
Yeah, it was different, especially here in Australia. I guess it's such a diverse and multicultural country, but my school in particular was a bit different, and yeah, it was hard because you're trying to learn the Australian way, but at the same time try to hold on to your Indigenous culture and what what you've been brought up with. So for me, that's always been a big part. Like at home, we spoke Fijian. We go to school, we speak English, and all the, I guess, customs and traditions we've always lived by have been big in my life. Yeah.
Talking about football, how do you think that helped break down the barriers that people like yourself and me live with through our lives?
Yeah, it's massive, especially for children. I think having this weird shaped ball, it was, as funny as it sounds, it was the way to make friends. It was a way to break down those barriers, like you said. And for me, if you didn't have footy chat to talk on a Monday morning at school, then you didn't fit in. So for me, I was like, I need to make the most of this. I don't have to be the best at it, but as long as I understand it, I'll make some friends. So for me, football was and still is a big part of my life.
Yep. So you talk about that funny shaped ball. What funny shaped ball were you playing with before then?
Yeah, I played with a lot of different. I had the rugby, basketball, everything, but football was big at my school. Like I think maybe 9 of us from my primary school got drafted.
Wow.
So we all went to school together, and we all kept each other on the right track. And for us, yeah, like for some people, it's a sport and it's a game, but for us, it helped us, I guess, pursue something bigger in life.
Yeah. Was there a coach at that school that you could attribute that to, or what do you think it was just you all feeding each other and wanting this way into another life?
Yeah, there was two coaches actually. There's a guy named Frank Caviccio and a guy named Tony Marachi, and they ran the local footy the footy club, but also they ran the youth community, so the Justice Centre. So for them, we had guys who were coming in and out of prison doing the wrong thing, and they sort of showed us what the wrong thing was and where you could end up if you didn't do the right thing. And they'd give us activities like we'd learn at the youth centre how to spray paint, we'd learn how to break dance, we'd learn how to do all these other things, which on a Friday afternoon we thought was fun, but for looking back at it now, it was probably a way to keep us off the street. So I think without those mentors and those coaches, we wouldn't have got to where we are now.
Oh, I can tell you there was certainly method in their madness. They knew what they were doing.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So let's look at diversity, and we'll change to diversity in the media. Growing up as a young boy, and certainly me growing up as a young Aboriginal woman or girl, I didn't see diversity within the media. What do you think that would have meant to you if you had seen that? Because let's face it, the media is in a bit of a shams when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, it's massive. I think for me as a kid, I had no one I could resonate with or someone who looked like me. So I think as a youngster, you try to find a pathway and you see someone who looks like you or you can identify with, and then try and pursue that. So for me, trying to find a footballer that had dreadlocks, it was dark skinned. It was hard. Like now, there's a few boys that look like me, and I think in the Indigenous space, it's the same thing. Like I idolise a lot of those guys who played at West Coast, and for me to see some of the guys in the media, there's a few like yourself, but I still wish there was more. And there's programs like the Yokai Footy and whatnot that are on TV and Marngrook that's been in the past, which I like seeing a bit of colour on TV, a bit of flair, and I just wish it was not isolated thing. I'd love if it was just a normality and there was more on the main networks and 7 and 9 and 10. So I think we're going in the right path to try and go down that avenue, but still we've still got a long way to go because I'd like to see a lot more diversity, on our screens.
Oh, absolutely. Have you ever had any young Fijian child come up to you and say, because of what you're doing, I feel like I can?
I have, and young Asaba Radigaleo, so he plays at Geelong. So he was one of them. He was a 16-year-old boy that was messaging me on Facebook or MySpace back in the day, and used to ask me for tips. And his family's Fijian. And there's another Fijian boy that plays at Collingwood who I played against this year as well. And for me, that those guys are doing what I used to do. David Roden was one of my big inspirations, and he used to help me out when he was playing with the Burgoyne boys at Port Adelaide. And I used to go to the games, and he'd give me a Port Adelaide singlet and get me in to watch the game, and just give me tips on what to do. For me, I had no understanding of what it took to be a footballer in terms of the fitness side of things and just the professionalism of it all. And he was a big help for me. So yeah, I think I play an important role in that way with those guys coming through. But yeah, I'd love it to be a normality with a lot more guys like myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do they say to you about how that your feedback and your mentorship means to them? What have they said to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that they said to me is I've inspired them to get to the highest level. But I think my biggest feedback to those guys is you've got to sort of fit in and abide to some of the rules of Western culture and football and whatnot. But I said the biggest thing as well is embracing your culture. Like, if you can bring your lifestyle and the way you are and your family have brought you up to the footy, I think that makes it the fun part. Like, footy can be boring at times, and I think when there's guys bringing their own culture to the game and to the footy club, it makes it so much more fun.
Bringing culture into any workspace that you work in, it opens up other people's eyes, doesn't it? To not just that narrow view that they've got of the world, but to what's more in the world.
Yeah, it's massive. With the multicultural program, which I've been doing for a number of years, even learning with guys like Majak Dor with the Sudanese community, Bashar Hooli as well with the Muslim community. Like, I've learnt so much, and also it's taught me a lot more about different cultures as well.
Yeah, and that's something I think we don't embrace enough, or in Australia, is like taking all of the beauty within everybody's culture. We're too busy with the media feeding us with what's negative about cultures, but we need to really embrace the beauty within all the cultures, and especially, if we've got somebody like yourself who's there front and center, like, let's learn as much as we can about, your life, and it encourages other people. So it's good to have you out and about doing what you do. I mean, obviously we love watching you play, but more importantly for me, it's about what you give to Australian society for your people and people of colour. It's really important. So yeah, thank you for that. So let's get to the racism side of things. How has that shown up in your life?
Racism has taken many forms. I guess, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Being a young black kid in Australia was always tough. Like, there's the in-your-face racism, people, yelling comments and whatnot. But I think the stuff that hurt more was the passive side of things. And I don't know, it's kind of hard. I always think about it. It's always hard to explain to someone. You might have had a bit growing up, but trying to explain to somebody what it's like or what it actually looks like is difficult, because some people wouldn't see it as racism, but there's times where you're watching inside a shop when you're trying to buy something, or you're doing things like that, and it hurts. It was tough. And as a kid, you don't know why people are doing it. You don't understand what drives it, and that probably hurt even more. So now, being older, I don't care. Like, if people are racism, I'll pull them up, but at the same time, it's not going to ruin my whole day. I'll get through it. But as a kid, it used to hurt. Yeah, it used to hurt so much.
Yeah, and it's not understanding where it comes from as a child, and not understanding that the stereotypes that people have about us play such a huge role. So, yeah, but I like, when I'm talking about racism, I like to think about how it makes me feel. So, like, to explain, because it is very difficult, because people are like, oh, you can get over that. You'll be right. Like, it's fine. But how does it make you feel when, you're put in a position where it is that in-your-face racism?
I hate those people that say that you'll get over it. For me, it was, I don't know, you feel like the lowest of lows. Like, I copped in my early days of playing football as well. And, people would be like, are you lost? You should be playing this game. No one looks like you. And it was hard. I found it really hard as a child, and even now, like the biggest one is social media. And I think, you know, I still get racist comments all the time in my inboxes, or you know, we lost the final to Collingwood a couple of weeks ago, and you know, you're black so and so, you did this, you didn't win this, you shit. Like, there's all these things that get thrown at you, and for me, that hurts still. And you know, you can be, people look at me and go, "Oh, Nick, you're at the highest level. You're successful. You're doing what you're doing in a sport. You're not going to cop any racism." But I don't think, you know, people who are like that, it doesn't deter them from coming at you no matter what level of, you know, success you're at. So for me, I could be, you know, having the time of my life, but that stuff just, you know, makes you feel like the smallest person. And you know, it happens to my teammates, in particular my Indigenous teammates, guys like Liam Ryan, happens to those guys all the time as well. And it affects me whenever it happens to them. You know, I feel it as well. So yeah, it's not a great thing.
When we do have the racism that does impact us, how do you help yourself heal as a person? What do you do to make yourself well again?
Yeah, I think when racism occurs, I think the biggest thing is talking about it. And for me, it's more the educational piece on telling people why it hurts so much. Like, I've had teammates in particular, or friends, who go, like you said, mention and go, you know, you'll get over it. What is it? It's just words, whatever. But when you explain to them you know, the lifelong journey you've been on and the stuff you've copped in the past, and why it hurts so much, that helps you, helps them understand, but it also helps me heal. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just not letting everyone know that, like I said before, no matter how big you are or what you do, when someone says something like that, it's so degrading, and it I don't know, it really ruins your week, it ruins your day, it ruins your whole year. So I wish it wasn't a thing, and I wish it never happened, but I guess the current reality of you know, where we're at, it does happen. And you know, finding tools to get around it is always challenging, but it does help.
Yeah. And do you think the Black Lives Matter movement is making a difference in Australia, and the way that Australia are looking at the way that we've had all this systemic racism within Australia?
Yeah, I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, it just made people ask questions. You know, sometimes people don't agree with it, or people don't, you know, have to be on the same page, but it gets them talking. And you know, in particular, we talk about what's happening in America with the social injustice and whatnot, and with the police brutality. But my biggest thing is, if you look what's happening at home, like I grew up with a massive Indigenous community, and the racism that occurred and still does occur, and people will say it doesn't, but I see it. Like, I'm in the community all the time, and I see it happening, and people would deny it's happening. And I think this movement in particular has made people talk about it, has challenged people as well. And, you know, it's also asked for change. Like you said, you've talked to the Attorney General about changing certain things online. But for me, it's like, how can you help this, you know, Indigenous community out? Or how can you help some of the stuff that's happening in our own backyard? And everyone's got a big voice when it comes to international affairs. But for me, I'm like, this same stuff happens here in Australia. And to say it doesn't happen, I've had a lot of people say it doesn't happen. I think that's very naive. It's very ignorant. And yeah, I'd love for some of that stuff to change as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. What do you think people could do more in a little thing every single day to make change in this space?
I think it's more education, just learning. Like, for me, like I said, I've grown up with a massive Indigenous community here in Australia, and I just love for some of our just everyday people here in Australia just to go visit a remote Indigenous community, or go learn a bit about culture, learn a bit about the stolen generation, learn a bit about, you know, what's occurred in the past here in Australia, and, you know, some of the systemic racism that's happened over time, and just understand why people have a certain mindset, why people are still upset, why people are angry. Because I think it's easy to point the finger and say, you know, this guy's not fitting into a box, or this type of people aren't doing what we're telling them to do. But I think if you understand what their family's been through, and the hardships they've been through, and why they're feeling and acting that way, I think that'll make it so much better. So yeah, I think people just have to go out and learn and understand, you know, different cultures a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. It is about, I'm a massive advocate for self-education. I think, you know, so many people missed out on education throughout their schooling years that they've got to do it. They've got to do it themselves, because it wasn't provided to them within their schooling, especially people of my age. You're much younger than me, but old duck here, my generation, they need to go out and self-educate. It's just so important. And to understand how past government policies continue to impact Aboriginal people. Absolutely. It can be really uncomfortable calling out racism. It can be, it's quite difficult at times. Can you tell us a time where you've actually stood up and called out racism, but it's been difficult for you to do that, but you've done it anyway?
Yeah, it's happened heaps. I think on the sporting field, probably the biggest platform. I used to be, like you said, I used to be scared of calling it out. I thought, I'm being a sook. I just got to cop it. It's normal sledging and people just trying to get under your skin. But yeah, calling it out, I had someone in the crowd early days yell it out, and similar to Adam Goods' scenario where he called out, which was a young girl, but for me it was a 60-year-old man who was fans and was calling me every name under the sun about my skin color and my race, and what upset me was no one around him was calling him out, and I had to do it from the field. And I think as an industry in particular, in the AFL, I think we've gotten a lot better with people if they hear it now, they'd call it out. But back then, this is 10 or so years ago, no one was helping me. And I felt like, how is everyone sitting around letting such a person say certain things? And I think it took a lot of courage to call them out and follow it up. And for me, I wasn't angry at them. Like I not that I wanted to, make them feel bad, but for me, I just wanted to educate them and say, yes, I'm dark skinned. Yes, I look different, but you have to accept it. You can call me a bad footy player. You can call me whatever you want, but don't talk about my race. Don't talk about my skin color. And it still happens today. And I think we have gotten better, but I think calling it out is still a hard task. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to do so.
It can be really difficult to call out racism when there aren't any support structures put in place of what next. Would you agree?
100%. I think the biggest thing is the follow-up. Like, if you call it out and then nothing gets done afterwards, you kind of feel bad and you think, I'm wasting my time, wasting everyone else's time. But if there's a follow-up process, there's something that can, like I said, keep them accountable or keep them honest. It makes it so much easier to call people out.
Yeah, and you did touch on that the AFL space is actually getting better, and I agree that it is. Does it give you hope for the future with racism and the steps we're taking?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the steps that AFL's taken and some of the things they've got in place to, that's been implemented to try and stop the racism that happens, especially with crowd control and some of the social media stuff, and even footy clubs. Like, I think people are starting to learn a lot more about racism and how unacceptable it is. A while ago, I don't think I would want a child. I wouldn't want any of my family playing footy. I would have thought it was a hard thing to come into. And I said, you're going to cop this every week. You go as far as looking at Goodsy's doco and you go, why would you want your son playing in the AFL if they're going to treat you like this for the colour of your skin? And now I think we've come a long way. I think it's all been a learning process, albeit it's been hard for certain people that have had to pave the way. But now I think we're going the right way. I think the biggest thing with storytelling is it teaches people, like, subconsciously, it just teaches them the right messaging and it teaches them the right way. And you don't have to preach it, you just have to show it in my form, it's been a book form with pictures and some of the words. But I think educating at such a young age is important because, these kids are the future of the generations and they're going to influence everyone else from there on. So for me, telling a story and teaching them the right thing is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about the one small thing that people can do to stop racism. What's a big thing they can do within their community?
A big thing they can do in the community is just to go out and learn about cultures and speak up, especially when it comes to matters of injustice or racism. Speaking up, I think that the most potent form is when you're silent and you don't say anything. So if there's injustice or racism, like I said earlier, if someone doesn't talk about it, someone doesn't call it out and they just look past it, that hurts more than saying something. For me, I'd just love everyone to be on the same page and know that it's not okay. And it's a courageous thing to do it, but it means a lot to people who are, on the receiving end of those things.
Allies are a really important part of this stopping racism and bringing an end to racism. Who's an ally that has stood by you and stood up for you? I always think back to my senior coach. Like I've had people call out things in the past that I didn't agree with, and like I said earlier, it's courageous to come out and call that out on your own. But when you have someone else with you, it makes it so much easier. Like anything in life, you've got someone helping you or on your side, an ally, it makes it so much easier. So for my coach, someone with such seniority and respected in the community, for him to come out and go, this isn't right, and publicly in the media say, this isn't accepted,
it makes me feel a lot better and it helps me cope a lot more. So yeah, I always remember that because that's something that always sticks out to me.
Pathways is a massive issue within the AFL. We're looking at pathways to make sure that more Indigenous boys and girls come from remote communities to be a part of the AFL. It's not working to its best ability at the moment. What do you think we could do with the pathways to involve other people of other nationalities within, say, umpiring or administration within the AFL?
Yeah, that's been a massive focus of mine. I run the Nat Academy and the kicking goals program in some of our remote communities. And for me, it's more about pushing, not necessarily being a footballer. Like every child wants to be, the gun footballer in their team, kick all the goals and whatnot. But it's probably more how can you be involved in the AFL workspace on a different level, whether it is umpiring. Like one of my good mates, David Roden, he's a goal umpire. He's transitioned from being a player to the other side, and he's trying to help bring some colour behind the goal. I don't think we'll ever be fit enough to be a field umpire, but he's trying to drive that. And for me, I think he's been shown on TV a fair bit this year. With
I was going to say, is he doing like the flags? Like he's got a bit of charisma going there behind
and
him.
I think they've shown him smiling behind the goals, which I think that brings fun to the game. That brings excitement. It brings something different, and I'd love to see that more often. Like I'd love to see more David Rodens behind the goals, because who would have thought a goal umpire smiling is funny or it's newsworthy. So I always get into him, but for me it means a lot because it shows other kids of colour that you don't have to be a player. You can be on the officiating side of things as well. But also on the coaching level, like I've had, what hurts me is some of the stars of the game normally go into a coaching role and work at a footy club, whether it's an assistant coach or a forwards coach or whatever it is. There's not too many Indigenous. There's not too many guys of colour who are doing that. And you look inside a coaching box on TV, or you look on the field, like you said earlier, and that diversity isn't really there. I think Australia is such a diverse place, but in our industry, I don't think it's portrayed enough. So I'd love to see more people not only playing footy, but in the actual, in the workforce and behind the scenes of an actual footy club. I'd love to see the diversity showcase a lot more.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today and talking about the Do More campaign. It was great. And thanks for sharing your insight and yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks for, hosting this and doing what you're doing. And like you said, we can always do more. We can always do more.
Find ways you can do more at domoreproject.com.au.